My name is David Summerfleck. For over 20 years, I worked as a digital marketing agency project manager and consultant, where I helped business owners go from failure and ruin to reinvesting profits. Now I'm interviewing other experts and professionals to find out what makes them tick and get their thoughts on how you can learn from their experiences and revitalize your life professionally and personally. We cover topics as wide-ranging as digital marketing, business innovation, culture, global trends, and ways we can all better channel our creativity. So let's join the discussion. In this episode, we're going to mix things up a little bit and answer a listener question about style guides for website development and specifically their time frame. So we're going to take a brief pause, listen to the question, and then come back and answer.
Hi, David. My question is, how long does it take on average for a graphic designer to design a website style guide and a mock-up of the homepage with a mock-up of the same homepage in mobile size? Thanks.
Hi, Natalie. Thanks for your question. Let's go ahead and break this down. So before we can really talk about how long should it take for a style guide to be written, let's first define what a style guide is and what it should include. So a style guide basically can be anywhere from maybe 20 pages and go up from there as needed. It can and should list such items as the font types used, the types of fonts used for headlines and sub-headlines, how blog posts are written as opposed to body text, what colors your brand should use. There are computer codes, which are called the hex codes. The style guide should also include how you write blog posts in what tone, how email should be written to clients as opposed to staff. The style guide should also include, obviously, the logo and maybe one or two instances of examples of where the logo is ideally placed. Policies on how newsletters should be written and formatted, how blog posts can and should be formatted or outlined so that going forward, if, say, for example, you were to hire someone to help you write content, they would be able to look at the style guide and realize how your blog posts are written, how many links they're going to be, in what format and in what tone. Some sample tones could be very casual and informal, whereas some businesses want their blog posts to be written in a more serious, informational style, depending on what type of face they want to put forward to the public and their consumer base. You should also include information such as how you would link to outside sources, copyrights for images if needed. Basically, in a nutshell, you want to include everything that you would need to maintain a professional looking branding, professional content, social media posting, advertising, SEO direction, advertising, and other elements that would basically inform design and how you promote the business outward facing. Now, as a business grows and expands, there will be more layers. There may be more departments. You may pick up clients and contracts of varying natures. So as you do that and expand into new markets, you'll want to be able to update the style guide so that it can apply in new ways and address new needs that you didn't see before. So why would you need a style guide, and what purpose does it serve? Now, the style guide informs the creation of, as we said, streamlined content so that you can produce all different types of content more regularly and more easily, and so that everything looks very consistent, not necessarily corporate, but consistent, so that you can see that it's all coming from the same company, that it all fits in with that specific type of company, with the company message, with their branding, and the image they want to present to their consumers, their investors, and anyone who might subscribe or use their website or their items or services. The style guide should also address SEO, at least to some degree. For example, if you're a small local mom and pop, a small business, furniture warehouse, for example, or a local dental practice, or a local yoga studio, whatever it is, you would also want to address, is your SEO going to be targeted locally? If you're in an extremely competitive market, such as New York or LA, then you may want your SEO to be hyper local, meaning that you're going to focus very specifically on the activities in a particular borough or district or city or neighborhood. Because the further out you go, the more competition there could be in a specific city and, of course, in a broader state. So you want the style guide to address that if at all possible and if it is known at that time. And certainly, it doesn't do you much good to have a website if it doesn't have SEO. Now, SEO is search engine optimization. It's how you outrank competitors online. So in my humble opinion, as someone who's been in digital marketing for over 20 years, I can't imagine doing any type of marketing or advertising that does not incorporate SEO. And I can't really imagine a style guide that doesn't address SEO to some degree at least. So that's a given. Social media marketing for efficiency and direction, you want the style guide to address that. So someone in the company can post to social media on a daily or weekly basis at the very, very least as you grow and expand. And also, obviously, you're going to want to know these things for such things as speaking at conferences or attending conferences or speaking to different groups or meeting with investors or teams or what have you. So when should you use a style guide as a business and as a brand? So let's dig into that very briefly. You would want to use a style guide as a business and as a brand when it's something that is profit focused and you are very concerned. If not concerned, then you really have an interest in how it's going to be perceived, how it's going to be taken, and how you're judged by consumers, and you're very serious and committed to it. If you're very committed to it and you want this to grow exponentially over time, then obviously you want to depict it in a very professional light. So you don't want to write a blog post one day, for example, that's very casual and informal, and then next week have someone else or maybe even yourself write a blog post that's very serious and very scholarly or very informational. It's going to look weird to people who might go to the website externally as consumers and say, why is one blog post written one way, but then another blog post is written in a different way? So that's one big reason to have a style guide. Obviously, you want all pages of the website to look consistent and fit in. Otherwise, it doesn't really do you much good. And that's really one of the biggest drawbacks with free do-it-yourself or template builder types of services when it comes to website development and digital marketing specifically, is that if you're not already an expert in design and marketing and SEO, then you're not going to know what to program into your do-it-yourself template. And that's why most of them either don't look professional or don't ever really outrank competitors or show up in Google search results, because if you don't know what you're doing, then how are you going to know how to do a job that's on par with a competitor? So it's very important that what you put forth looks consistent, feels consistent, fits the tone that you want to send out of your company, that it's of a certain nature and in a certain field. Now, when is a style guide not necessary? A style guide isn't necessary if it's a hobby with no profit-focused business attached to it. So some examples of that might be if it's just a hobby you do just for fun. It could be for any type of I don't want to say enterprise because that's typically 50 or more employees. But I would say a style guide is not necessary if it's a hobby and you just don't see it growing into a profitable business or a nonprofit enterprise. And it's a big disconnect with nonprofit organizations because it's a myth that nonprofit organizations don't make profit. They do. They have to, or else they can't survive. But the difference is that they take that money that they make from donations typically or from grants, and they put that back into infrastructure so they may continue to expand and reach more of who they're trying to serve. So it's more deliberate, it's more focused, but they have to generate profit or they can't exist. So who should create the style guide? Now, to answer that, ideally, the creators of the style guide should be a designer, a copywriter, and or developer working in coordination so that the designer takes care of visual elements such as logo and color, font, basically any and all types of visual design, whereas the copywriter who's working with the designer and the developer would be able to address the tone, the ideal market consumer you're trying to target, and how what you write is going to be unique. It's going to be entertaining, but also informative, but also not so studious as to make readers lose interest. And then the developer's role is knowing about linking, external versus internal linking, what your SEO is and why. And so these three different types of freelancers or creative specialists should be able to collaborate and work in coordination. Now, in some cases, if you're working with a very experienced digital marketer, they can do all three of these things, and they would just take them in separate pieces as they move forward. So in other words, they would do design, then copywriting, then developing, and kind of fit these pieces together with you as you go along. So who should have and use the style guide once it's created? Anyone working on the site, producing content, writing material, interfacing with paying clients and staff, those are the types of people who should have and use the style guide once it is created. Now, how long should a style guide take to be created? Now, in my view, I like to move in a very efficient clip. I really don't like projects that go on beyond a specific date, because if they take longer than anticipated, it could take away time from working on other projects that you may also have scheduled in the pipeline. So it's very important to work in a structured, deliberate manner that's scheduled. So I personally cannot imagine any style guide taking more than 30 days at the very, very most. In most cases, a style guide should take maybe 2 weeks if they're getting open and clear communication from the client, or if the individual or group involved has been given the green light to do their best work and then present it to the client, which is to me always preferable. Now, if you're a very small new business or solopreneur or freelancer or service provider with no other employees or staff and with no intention of advertising online or writing content, then the style guide should take considerably less time since there's less to mention and less to cover. Now, in this case, a style guide could include the development of brand colors, fonts, showcase different versions of the logo you would use for email signatures and headers, for social media outlets such as LinkedIn versus Facebook and so on. But again, over time, if your business venture grows, which obviously you're going to want, you'll need more, even if you can't see where that scope would appear in the here and now. Full-sized businesses, those with staff that have marketing and advertising budgets and manage contracts, will want a style guide to address everything from daily content creation across print and video and audio platforms to e-commerce branding, to clothing that staff will wear in meetings or out in the public, or to sell online, how to write their content, to whom their marketing is directed, and why, and whatever the company produces and sends out to consumers and potential consumers that would be seen and used. So, some tips to remember. Style guides should include design for what I call one design to rule them all. In other words, there's no website for desktop and then one website for mobile. And I know you'd mentioned this in your question. This is 2021. You really don't need one website for desktops, one website for smartphones. What you need is responsive design, meaning that the website responds to changing screen resolutions or device sizes, so that my website will look one way on a widescreen PC monitor, but then will look very, very similar if you were to take out your phone and you can actually visibly see the elements moving and adjust depending on the size of the monitor or of the screen. And, back in the old days, back when Caesar was in power, we would make sure that a company website was responsive by, you'd go to the Apple store or you'd go to the Microsoft store or even Walmart, and you would, look at the website on different screen sizes and different devices so that you could tell without any question that it would look professional and very upfront and very appropriate for the type of business that you were designing for, regardless of who would be looking at the website. And that was the old days. And now any professional designer and developer can use a different suite of tools to make sure that the design will be responsive. So you really don't need, and in my view, it's really shouldn't have one design for a website on a PC or desktop, and then one for mobile, and then one for your tablet sizes. That's not the way design is done in 2021. It's responsive design. Now, most apps are, I think you also mentioned apps. So if you have a website, you really don't need an app. You need the responsive website. In most cases, an app is nothing more than a shortcut that redirects the consumer to the actual website. Now, if that's the case, In most instances, the app isn't necessary because it's just a shortcut. Most apps, when we're talking about apps from a developer standpoint, are apps like Uber, which is not a website. It's an actual program that is used for the driver to get directions to where you are. And then for you, conversely, on the opposite side, to see where the driver is in relation to where you are, but also see who's coming to pick you up, make sure you pay them, make sure you can review them, and other options. So the app, in other words, serves a very specific purpose as opposed to just directing you to the website. And that's why apps are typically very expensive to build out, because they do so much more than just take you to a website. You shouldn't need an app if you have a responsive website. So you can have, when we talk about the style guide, you have e-commerce if you are going to take payments from your customers, from your consumers or clients. And most company websites are going to want to use e-commerce because you need money. And you're going to want to collect money from your customers or clients. So it's important that there should be some mention of fonts and color palette and writing across the spectrum for e-commerce used as well. Even with e-commerce, you don't always need an app. Most grocery stores online today simply have a page of their website that connects to Instacart, or they outsource the actual shopping where they deliver the groceries to your door through Instacart, which is a completely different website. So the need for an app, not always there. In most cases, I don't think it's there. So style guides should include design standards as well as content, voice, and style for everything from e-commerce to social media, blogging, video creation, ads, and even how contracts are written if done in coordination with a lawyer or legal team. Style guides should work hand in hand with marketing so that the content written isn't only in the voice in perspective that you want, such as casual and easy to understand versus educational or scholarly or informational, but also directed to who your ideal consumer is. In marketing, we also call this the customer or consumer avatar. The more organized, and I would say thought out and deliberate the style guide is, the more it will include and therefore cover you for the future and help in making guided decisions as the company may grow, may change hands, may pick up investors, and produce more types of marketing collateral over time. So I hope this information has been helpful to you, but also to anybody out there listening who is a business owner or entrepreneur, service provider, nonprofit, who wants to know, why do we need a style guide, or what purpose does a style guide need? So thank you for anyone watching or listening. And if you have a question about style guides that maybe goes in a different direction, or if you have a question about digital marketing or small business in general, feel free to submit your question by going to dms.blue/podcast guest, and you can record it just like Natalie did. So thanks for watching or listening, and take care. Thanks for tuning in to the David Sommerfleck podcast. If you would like to apply to be a guest on the podcast, or would like to ask a question we may use in a future episode, please go to www.dms.blue/podcast guest. Thanks again for tuning in, and hope to meet you in the next episode.